In this lesson, we're going to add multi-subobject materials to the doors and the stairs, and there are actually a few other objects that do need multiple materials as well, namely the roof block over here, this roof slab, as well as, of course, the stairs that we mentioned, as well as the door which is in front here. Now I'm going to isolate these and just discuss some of the ideas behind how you can tackle these objects. I'm not going to do all of them since it will take a little bit too much time and you may already understand the principle. First of all, the slab that we have on the roof is textured as the walls are. So basically the same texture on the walls continues up into the roof. Now underneath we have this ceiling area, and this will actually, or should rather be, textured as plain white. Now you could of course go into your last edit poly in your stack and just go and detach all of the polys that are separate materials. That is one of the easiest ways to do it in terms of texturing. What happens though if you do that is that if you do need to make any changes to your model, it's going to be a lot more difficult because now you're dealing with multiple elements to your model, and you're going to need to select all of them and then apply edit poly modifiers on top of multiple objects. It just gets very, very messy. So it's sometimes a lot easier just to use these multi-subobject materials and keep your models as single large blocks. For example, this slab is going to be even more complex because the underside should be a relatively clean looking slab with a ceiling inside of it, or not a ceiling but rather painted white. The edge will be the same as the wall so that it can blend in with this edge, so that we can read this edge continuing as one texture. This part over here will most likely have a wall texture as well, and the inside, everything that is inside of this glass balustrade will have the same floor texture as this terrace. So what we need to do that is to add a extra editable poly into that. So you select the edges and then you connect, and then you basically move all of those vertices into the right place so that they lie just underneath the balustrade. So most of this has been touched and worked on already in the other objects, so I'm not going to do the entire thing, but I think that you understand the principle, and that's really what I wanted to share with you. So once that is all done, you would then be able to select each of those polys that are necessary for separate material IDs, and you would then go and create your own multi-subobject material. So the same thing happens with these stairs. You could either detach everything and then you would lose the ability to modify the stair object itself, or you could just go and add an edit poly on top of this, which won't change anything because you're only selecting the objects, for example the two sides, and you would basically give these two sides a different material ID. So this one would be called, it already is actually a ID 7, and the treads themselves are ID 1. The edge is ID 2, and the back edge is ID 3. So you can see that every single face already has an ID. But if you're not happy with the IDs of all the multiple different faces, then you can go and use this editable poly where you just apply two single IDs. So you basically override the IDs that are generated automatically through the stair tool. And that's exactly the same issue that you're going to be facing with the door. You'll notice that if I isolate this, you have completely different IDs on many different parts of this door. This element here, which is your main door panel, is going to be ID 3, that's ID 1, that's ID 4, the inner edge is going to be ID 5, and so forth. So you can either create a very complicated multiple ID material where you have, let's say, 7 or 8 different sub materials, or you can just add an edit poly and then modify those objects. For example, here I would just choose the glass. I would convert it to a poly selection, change that ID to 2, and then invert my selection, and this ID would all be 1. Then I could go and take the material that I've already created for those screens that we did earlier, make a copy of that, and instead of the number 2 info, I'm just going to drag in the glass. That's going to get copied in, and this one's going to be called glass doors. This I can apply to the object, and in one go all of that is done. Now the beauty is that because I haven't changed anything in this editable poly, in other words I haven't changed any polygon numbering or any vertex numbers, I can still have full access to my parameters down in the pivot door below. So I can still open and close my door, everything still functions perfectly, and the object is textured in a much simpler way than going and creating a 10-step submaterial, multi-material ID. So that brings us to the end of this lesson. This one was quite short, just to basically complete and finish the talk about multi-sub-object IDs or materials. And in the next lesson, one of the final texturing lessons, we're going to just deal with the pool, where we are going to texture the mosaic on the inside and especially this falling edge on the outside. And we're going to do some render tests just to see how these water materials are working, since this does often require quite a lot of experimentation, trial and error before this all looks correct. So all of that will be handled in the next lesson.